And there's Determined Veteran. What's going on, and welcome back. So we're back at it again today on Project Stepchild. It's time to get the clutch in, maybe even get the transmission in. I don't know, we'll see. I'm ready to get it in and get the car off stands and be able to drive it. I mean, I'm getting tired of it being on stands, so we're gonna get busy today. At least get the clutch in. That's the goal for today, is to at least get the clutch in. Depending on time, we'll see about getting the transmission up in there, and then go from there. So we got to take some measurements and make sure everything is going to fit correctly, and there's the correct clearances and all that stuff within the bell housing for the clutch, slave cylinder, and all that good stuff. So anyway, let me get to cleaning up and we'll go from there. As you saw, got the factory flywheel off, and before I went any further, I wanted to check clearance on the new bell housing. Now this side here, I've got plenty of clearance between the where the starter sits and the header. Looks like there's going to be no issues there, so that side's good. And let me see if I can get you in here. This side is pretty tight, but we've got clearance. Hopefully you can see that. There's probably about, 4 or 5 millimeters clearance between the one tube there and the bell housing. But other than that, I mean, it clears fine. No issues there. So I did want to show that before we went any further and got into the clutch assembly. All right, so before you put your ram clutch in, what's going on here is we're putting a ram clutch in the car with a factory style slave cylinder slash bearing. So we need to take some measurements on the clutch and down underneath the car. What we're doing is we're making sure we have the recommended clearance and the correct preload of the slave cylinder. So we need to do these things first before we can move any further. So we're going to do that now. And RAM provides this handy sheet where you can write all your measurements down. Tells you exactly what to check, so it should be very easy to do. Even a caveman could do it. So let's get to it. Let's take some measurements and see what happens. Okay, so the first measurement that I want to take is probably the easiest. What I need to measure is the actual clutch height with the clutch, flywheel, and everything bolted together. So since it comes bolted together, before I take it apart, I'm going to take that measurement. So we lay it on a flat surface, and we're going to measure from the fingers here to the very bottom. Now inside here, I can't get the edge of my caliper over to the finger, so I grab this washer and I'm going to put it on top, take that measurement. I've already measured the thickness of the washer, so I have that thickness. I'm going to take this measurement and then I'll subtract the thickness of the washer, and that should be my clutch height. So I come up with 3.429. Well, the little 5 went away, but it did have the little 5 on there. So 3.4295 is what we'll go with. And I'm going to subtract that number, the thickness of the washer, 3.4295 minus 0.1875, thickness of the washer. So it's 3.242. So I'm gonna write that down, and then also on here, which on this paper it's dimension C. Not that that really matters for this video, but it's dimension C. So in the dimension C box, that's where I'm going to write it. We need to take a measurement underneath the car, and that is going to be the crank flange to engine block. So basically the face of the flange to the block, and I believe, and it says that includes the block plate. So the block plate needs to be in position, and we need to check from the face of the crankshaft flange to that block plate and see what we come up with. So let's get underneath there and let's get that measurement. As you can see, we've got the block plate up there. You want to make sure it's sitting flat against the engine block, because if not, you could actually be out past the crankshaft, and that's not good. So we're on the crankshaft, and then since this is a Coyote engine, you want to make sure that your crank position sensor ring, I guess you call it, this tells the computer what position the crankshaft is in. You want to make sure that's in place as well. It's a very small distance here. This is gonna be kind of difficult because there is not much distance at all between the crankshaft and the block plate. So I'm gonna do the best that I can to get an accurate measurement. We got 0.055. Now we can crawl back out from under the car and take a couple more measurements. All right, so the next measurement that we need to take is from the face of the bell housing here, where it bolts to the block, to the slave cylinder. Now I've taken the liberty of draining the slave cylinder of fluid. Probably still a little bit in there, but I need to compress it, so I didn't want to spit fluid everywhere. That kind of sucks because I really didn't want to do that, but it is what it is. So that's what we've got to do. The first measurement I'm going to take is the slave cylinder extended. So it's already in the fully extended position, so that'll be an easy measurement. And I'm going to use this level, this for a straight edge, and I lay this flat against the bell housing, take that measurement against here, and then take the measurement of this width and just subtract it, and that'll be the number that I need. So hopefully you will be able to see the caliper reading. I'm trying not to block it so that you guys can see it. Let's see what this comes out to. Make sure we're flat against everything. Looks like 3.673. Okay, so got the measurements. Sorry for not showing the measurement on the slave cylinder compressed, but I was all in the way of the camera. I wouldn't have been able to get you guys a good view of that. But anyway, so that one measured 4.825. The extended measurement was 3.673. So then my straight edge I was using is exactly 1 inch. So we're going to subtract 1 inch from each one of these measurements, and we're going to write it down. So measurement D should actually be 2.673. And dimension B, which is the compressed measurement, would be 3.825. A and C we're going to add together. I've already taken the liberty of doing that. So we got 0.055, the distance from the block plate to the crankshaft flange, plus dimension C, which is the height of the clutch assembly. Add those together is 3.297. Measure and record in boxes A and C and then B and D. So we just did that. Add the dimensions A plus C. We just did that. Now subtract the clutch installed height minus B. This result is the bearing clearance available. So we need to take the entire clutch installed height, which is A plus C, and we need to subtract B. 3.825, and we're going to subtract the clutch installed height, which is 3.297. So I get 0.528, and it says if clearance is less than 0.2, a ram slave cylinder may be required for proper fit. So it looks like we're good there. We're above the minimum. Now we need to establish the correct bearing preload, which is step 2, and we're going to subtract dimension D minus the clutch installed height. The result is the bearing preload. So 3.297 minus 2.673, that's 0.624. The minimum preload is 0.5. It says if preload is less than 0.5, an appropriate size slave spacer shim must be used to achieve the minimum preload. So it looks like we're good. Okay, so let's sum this up. Basically what we're trying to find, it sounds a little confusing, but I want to kind of give you the basics of what you're trying to find here. Basically with the bearing compressed, you're wanting to know the clearance between the clutch fingers and the bearing. How much distance, you're going to have a gap there. So that gap needs to be a minimum of 0.2. So you need a minimum gap. So if your clutch here was inserted into the bell housing and there's a gap in between the fingers and the slave cylinder, that gap needs to be a minimum of 0.2 inches. It says to allow for clutch wear. Okay, we are at 0.528. We are good there. The other dimension that you're trying to figure out is with the slave cylinder fully extended or free, meaning it's pushed out with the spring, I guess that's in there. So that distance, your clutch is actually going to touch the slave cylinder and it's going to push it in a little bit. So basically that is the preload that's on that bearing. And this is stating that the minimum preload needs to be 0.5. So you need at least 0.5 inch of bearing preload. If you don't, then you'll have to shim the slave cylinder. Basically where it bolts to the transmission, you will have to put a shim there that will move that slave cylinder out. Once you put the clutch in, that actually pushes the slave cylinder in towards the transmission more. So that'll give you the minimum of 0.5 with the correct shim. So we've got 0.624, so we are good there. So everything checks out as far as is the clutch, is it going to work? And I'm using the stock slave cylinder. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but I will be using the stock slave cylinder. So everything checks out, which is good. Now we are okay to go ahead and install the clutch. But before we do, there's one thing I want to cover. So I'm going to be upgrading to a braided line, and I bought this off of Facebook Marketplace. So luckily I didn't have to pay full price, but this is the McLeod braided line. Now I did a little research on it and it doesn't look like this is available anymore. So I'm not sure if that's a good or bad thing. I'm not sure. It's not even on the McLeod website, but I'm going to use it. But it comes with the line, and from what I understand, these lines are made a little longer, so that is good, just in case it needs to be. But it comes with a line, and then these two fittings. So everything will bolt up like stock, but they say this helps a lot with the clutch releasing and stuff like that. A lot of people will miss gears or whatever because the clutch is not fully releasing, and this helps to eliminate that, because they say the factory line can flex or like expand. It's plastic, so not good for hydraulics, honestly, and this is a hydraulic system. But there we go, we've got the clutch figured out as far as our clearances, so we can now get started on that. We've got to take the clutch apart and then we can start installing it. So man, let's get to it. I'm pretty excited about this. All right, so out of curiosity, I did weigh the ram clutch assembly versus stock, and the ram clutch is, well, according to my scales, 57.8 pounds and stock is 47.6. So you've got a good 10-pound difference, 10 pounds more on the ram, which that's a lot of weight. That kind of sucks because we're at the same time trying to reduce weight, but I mean, you got to make a sacrifice somewhere, and it's going to be here because we need the grip from the clutch. We can't go with a stock clutch. It's just not going to happen. But this is a dual disc, so it's going to weigh more. Stock is just a single disc and is what it is. So just wanted to throw that out there just for curiosity's sake, in case anybody was wondering. So the first step, it tells us we need to remove these nuts, which is what hold the pressure plate to the flywheel. So let's get those pulled off. I think that's all of them, so we're just gonna hopefully just pick this up off here and set it to the side. Let's make some room here, and I'm probably just gonna flip it over so nothing really touches it. There she goes. Now those washers will probably fall out of there. Let's go ahead and get those out. That's all of them. So now we get to see inside the clutch. Give you guys a shot of that. We'll just kind of set this out of the way over here. Okay. And if you caught my video on the unboxing of this clutch, these are the metallic discs. We didn't want to go with organic because this is going to be hopefully a high horsepower application, and organic's good for more of a street driven type thing. I mean, it'll handle the power, but if I was driving it more on the street, probably would have went organic. But I think the main thing that this car is going to see, or it's going to see a lot of drag racing. So we needed something that was going to be super strong and really bite and hold. So that's why we went metallic. So that's the disc we have in here. We did not go organic. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take off this disc here. This is a sprung hub disc here. Let's take this disc off and let's see what's underneath. Okay, so the next part in the clutch is the floater plate. This is the floater plate here. It says floater plate drives off of the 3 stands mounted to the flywheel with straps, which are bolted in position. This is how the floater plate should fit when installing the unit in the car. Note, the pressure plate stands each have shims on top of them. Be sure they are in place when installed. lift the floater plate out of the assembly. This guy over here. Okay, so this is the bottom disc. This is a solid hub, also metallic, and we can lift this out. Now, to try to keep everything organized, I'm trying to, as I lift it off the flywheel, flip it back over so everything is still in the orientation that it needs to be. Also, in my other video, the unboxing, here's that dot that I talked about there, basically so you can line everything back up. So that's really cool that they do that, and that way you can ensure that you get it back on right. So now I think we can take these stands off. Now these have shims underneath them. I'm probably going to try to leave them in place. I don't know if they're all the same thickness, so they may not be. So I'm going to try to leave all those in place. What I will probably do, or what I'm going to do, is I'm going to put these nuts back on here. That way these will not come off. All the shims will be in the same place that they are supposed to be, because like I said, I don't know if they're different thicknesses or not. So I don't want to risk those coming out and getting a mix matched. I don't want to risk that. So I'm going to put these nuts back on here. So now that everything is apart, we are good to go ahead and install the flywheel. So we can finally put this up on the engine, and I do have new bolts for that. As far as I know, the stock ones are torque to yield, which is a one-time use, so we won't be using those. I do have ARP. I did buy a set of ARP flywheel bolts, because why not go ahead and upgrade while everything's apart and go with ARP. So let's get this let's get the flywheel in place and get this clutch put together. So as you can see, we got the flywheel up here. Put one bolt in to hold it up, and then got the other bolts. Instructions say to put some Loctite on these and torque them to 75 to 85 foot-pounds. I think we'll go to 85. I'm having to use a 3/8 socket with an adapter to go to my 1/2-inch torque wrench. So being that I have the adapter on there as well, and it may absorb some of the torque, when I have to do stuff like that, I always like to kind of go on the high side of the set point. So just in case, I mean, that's what I do. I don't guess you have to, but it's just what I do. We're gonna get these in. Still got a few more on the bench up there, so gotta grab those. Now we got that on, let's continue. The torque wrench right there, and let's keep going. Alright, so here we go. We are ready to put the disc and floater plate in. The instructions say to go ahead and stack it on the alignment tool, and this is the steel alignment tool. This thing is like very precise. Now we just put this into the pilot bearing, and we have to line these straps up. Let's see if I can get this without dropping it on my face. That'd be nice. Alright, so we got that in there. We want to line these straps up. If you can see, the hole here, hole there, and there's one more hole up there. And this requires the stands as well. So hopefully that'll stay up there for me. when I put a stand in one of the bolts through. All right, so we got those run up by hand. And get a socket and wrench, and let's get those tightened down. So when I removed these, they weren't super tight, so and the instructions say just to install them. So I don't think there's a specific torque value for these, as I think they're just there to hold the floater plate still. So we're gonna make sure they're nice and snug. Like I said, they weren't super tight when I took them off, so we are just going to snug them up. I think that should do it. I think that'll work there. And now we should be putting the pressure plate on. Now, one thing to mention real quick that the instructions say, it does say to make sure there's a slight gap between the bottom disc and the floater plate, and which there is. I can see a slight gap between the metallic pads, so we are good to go there. Let's grab that pressure plate and let's get that thing put on. Okay, so one important thing here is to make sure that your cover straps, your cover has straps on it, and these straps, to make sure they're staggered, meaning if this strap is here, the cover strap needs to be here. When I did the unboxing video, I talked about a dot. My dot is right there, and there should be a dot on the cover as well. I don't know if you can see it, but here's my dot on the cover. So I know if I line that dot up with the other one that's on the flywheel, then I should be good to go. So I'm gonna get the dot around that side, and here's one of my holes for the bolt, which is gonna be this guy here. And as long as I put that one there, then I should be good to go. So let's get this up here. All right, so now that this is up here, I'm going to put my washers and nuts on. Now, per the instructions, you want to evenly tighten these down and going in a cross pattern so that everything kind of comes together nice and even. All right, so I'm at the point to torque everything to 25 foot-pounds. I've already done this one and already done that one just to see where I was with those. So we're going to continue with the rest. Now we're going to bump it up to 30 for the final torque setting. Alright, let's see what we got here. Now hopefully my engine won't turn over too much, because I'm able to hold my hand on the torque wrench now. So let's see. And that's all 6 of them, so we are good to go. Clutch is on. Clutch is installed. So there we go. The Ram 9000 series clutch is installed in Project Stepchild. Finally, we are making some serious progress now. Next step is the transmission. Next step is the transmission. Get the transmission in there. Get the drive shaft, a new drive shaft in, and fill the transmission, put the exhaust back on, and we can drop this car off the jack stands. Hopefully we'll get some drive time, because you're supposed to give it about 500 miles for the transmission for break-in. What we'll probably do is we'll fill the transmission with fluid, do the break-in. The clutch is going to be going through the same break-in at the same time. But we're going to do that. Hopefully I can put some miles on the car and get these broken in. I don't want to wait too long, so I don't want to drive it one day and then not drive it for a while and then drive it again. I don't know if that has an effect or not. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't, but I'd like to get as many miles put on the car as possible in one day, so that way everything is broken in the shortest amount of time. But anyway, that's gonna do it for today. It's getting late and man, I'm beat. This thing beat me pretty good, but anyway, we're making progress, thank goodness. But I hope you liked this video. If you did, hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. We've almost got this car back off jack stands, and we'll see you on the next one.